Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today we have our presenter, Russ Rice. Russ worked as a crop consultant for 29 years in the Northwest Ohio and Southeastern Michigan area with Nutrien Ag Solutions. As a crop consultant, he's had the opportunity to implement and develop cropping plans with cover crops. And his focus today in this Lunch and Learn will be to discuss how to help a farming operation use and be successful adding cover crops to current farming practices. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. Russ, you can go ahead and go into presenter mode and feel free to take it away whenever.
All righty. All right. Can you still hear me?
Yep, you sound great, and it looks good too.
All right. Hi. Yeah, I am Russ Rice, and I'm presenting to you today just some information on some of the stuff that I have seen in this growing season and some different projects that we've been working on, but also the discussion of why grow a cover crop. Well, I think our main goal is to try and find a way to improve the soil health that we're working with. I know when it comes to farming, farmers are pretty much focused on the crop. They want to make sure that if it's corn or soybeans or whatever crop they're trying to grow, they want to maximize the yield with the programs that they're trying to run and whatever fertility programs that they're using. They're trying to be as efficient as possible. Well, when we start looking into cover crops, there's a lot of things going on. One, like I said, we're trying to improve the health of the soil. And by doing this, a cover crop is helping to bring more organic to the soil. When you start using cover crops, it's meant to help reduce erosion. It's given that soil a better opportunity to revitalize itself. But in the process, sometimes I know it can get scary. And for example, the picture that I have in front right now, you can see that that's a multi-mix. There's like 12 different varieties of plants in that mix. The biomass, when I pulled the test on that, the canopy was at 87%. When we did the biomass study on that, the carbon nitrogen ratio was at 20.3 to 1. And then the carbon credits or organic carbon that we were getting from that field averaged about 1,286 pounds per acre. And so just to give you an idea of where that field is running. And I know the farmer that had this field, for example, it's scary when looking at that and trying to figure out in May, how am I going to plant into that? And, am I going to get the seed in the ground like I'd like to? Well, he did. You can see in the picture to the left what the mulch looks like. Once he went through the cover, it laid down very nice. He got enough penetration for the seed to get to seed the soil contact. I know looking at that, you see all that organic, and how can a seed get down underneath there? But with the planter pressure that you can get down into that soil, the soil contact was very good. So you can see that the beans were just starting to get out of the ground. And that's what the beans look like now. So emergence is very good. The soybeans that you see there are very healthy. And then underneath that, you can see the canopy that now is down into a mulch. And so now the soil temperature, soil moisture you're improving the soil health by making sure that you have adequate amount of moisture to help feed that crop. And then you think about all the organic that you're putting out there. That organic is helping to capture or improve the nutrient holding capacity to that soil. And so you can imagine what the beans have to feed off of. It's not just regular commercial fertilizer, but it's the humus of that soil that's helping that plant to grow. This is another field. The biomass there was the canopy was at 85%. It was mainly of a barley or a grass and legume type mix. On that field, based on what you see there on that canopy or the clover or the cover that we have there, that had it was a carbon nitrogen ratio of 18.3 to 1, and the organic carbon that we're getting off of that field was, based on the test, was about 1,773 pounds per acre. Again, you can see what that cover looks like, trying to plant into it. This is what it looked like after he got done planting. Again, you can see where the mulch is laying down. The corn is coming up right through. So again, the seed to soil contact was very good. And the emergence, there was good energy in that corn. And this is what it looks like today. Now, that field does have a little bit of European corn borer. But other than that, the corn is very healthy. It's showing good energy. Again, you can just picture that corn is gaining nutrients through that soil. The soil moisture with that mulch down underneath is being protected. So everything there looks very good. This was another field with a cover, and this is mainly grass. The canopy on this was at 37%. And the carbon credit to that, based on our test, this was a 37.4 to 1 ratio, carbon to nitrogen. And the organic carbon that we're getting off of that is about 718 pounds per acre. Again, you can see what the cover looks like there. And now you can see what the corn looks like coming out. The energy of that corn also is very good. And the right-hand corner, you can see, again, what the mulch looked like underneath. And then the corn growing through it is very healthy. This was a field where we had red clover. The cover or the biomass that we had there was at 85%. That was the canopy that it produced based on the tests that we pulled from that field. The carbon nitrogen ratio was at 15 to 1, and the organic carbon that we're gaining from that is about 746 pounds per acre. Now, we did have a problem with, as the corn was emerging, we had slugs, a high pressure of slugs developed in this field. And you can see what that corn looks like now. The one thing that we experienced on this field was we terminated the clover early, and then they planted into this field. So the slugs needed green tissue, or that's what they wanted to feed off of. So the corn became the material that the slugs would eat. But far to the back on the right picture, you can see, which is south of the woods, that portion of the field, that was not terminated. It was not terminated before planting. It was terminated after planting, and the slug damage was a lot less. There's still some there, but the pressure was relieved because the clover fed the slugs instead of the corn. This was a field just down the road from where that clover field was at. This was an alfalfa field that was terminated before planting. But again, you can see here what the corn looks like. The energy is very good. You know, this is sort of like the old practice when you had alfalfa fields and you had it to alfalfa for maybe 5 or 7 years, and then granted, what crop do you plant into it? Corn, because all the nutrients that are available in that soil is meant to help corn get going, and we know that corn never wants to have a bad day, and as long as there's nutrients in that soil, the corn is going to gain from what it's experiencing. This is another farming operation. What happened here, and this is typical with this spring. Some of the farming operations, they terminated in March and everything seemed to be working very well. But every once in a while we had a field that could not get terminated before planting because of all the rain that we got. Well, this field, he ended up planting into the mulch. So the rye or the grass cover was very thick. And granted, underneath that, where you see the clover or the grass laying down, the soil was a wet, muddy. You put a shovel to it, it was just mud. And so we were worried that the corn emergence was going to be slow. But the one thing, as we observed in this field, that's what this field looks like now. The east side of this field, he ended up mulching, or he took a disc to it just to break it down. So it was a little bit easier for the planter to get into the field. But the west side, he left alone. He just planted into it as the rye was standing. The only difficult part that he had on this field was that the rye would wrap around his units, and so it made it very difficult to plant. So that's why he ended up on the east side where he mulched it down and he planted into that. Now, maybe we would have had some other issues if the seed would have been just in the trash of that residue that we had from looking at that, but he didn't. He planted, he made sure that his seed to soil contact was very good. So the seed did not rot in that muddy condition. It grew. And again, the energy of that soil was enough to keep that corn growing. And again, that's what it looks like today. These are some other farm operations around Northwest Ohio. The main thing I wanted to show, this is probably the most popular cover that farming operations are using. either wheat or rye or barley. They're easy to terminate, and I know you had that field there where they ended up terminating it later because it was just all the rain that we got from April to May, it just made things difficult to get things done on a timely manner. But when you have a situation like this where, yeah, you got your spraying done in March, you could terminate the cover. The corn does very good in this condition. There's very little stress for the corn to grow through. This is a farming operation, again, in Northwest Ohio. This is a situation where normally the farmer would terminate before planting, but being, again, the time of when this happened in May, he just went and planted into the soil. This would be more like a Napanee clay soil. And so the first picture on the left, top left corner, is what it looked like the day that he planted. And then about 3 weeks later, you can see the corn emerging through the cover. And then the lower left-hand picture, that's what it looks like today. And actually, it's amazing. The 3-week picture, the field to the low left, that was just in a week's time. So the corn took off. I know it probably gained its nitrogen from the side dressing, but the energy there, again, is very good. This is a situation where we had some grass forage. So this field had been a grass forage for about 3, maybe 4 years. And this farmer, all he did was he rolled it and planted into it. The soil, the drainage on this soil is not very good. But again, that's the one thing that a cover crop does for you. You think about all the root mass that this field has. If this grass, since this grass was growing for at least 3 years, the root mass that was developed in that soil created great aeration of the soil. So water movement, air and water movement would be very good in this situation. The soil, yeah, was wet. It's, again, a heavy clay soil. But this is what it looks like now. So again, the energy of that soil is helping to feed this crop. And again, looks very good. This is a grower that I've been working with for a long time, but he wasn't interested in doing cover crops. He didn't think that it would work. But this past winter, he put some acres to cover. And so you can see a portion of the field where he put some wheat down. He put about 100 pounds to the acre. It's probably more than what he needed, but that's what he ran. So we left it alone. And then, like you can see to the right of the picture on the left, he did leave some areas alone. And we'll see at the end of this season, how well this progresses. But you can see the emergence of the corn is very good. And this is what it looks like today. The cover, you can see between the wide rows there, the cover is there protecting the soil. But so right now, the energy of that corn, if you're looking at that picture on the right top corner, there is some nitrogen burn, like some 28 happened to get on the leaf. This is another situation where farmer planted pumpkins into a standing rye, or I should say wheat. And So this is what it looked like the day that he planted. So green. And then you can see what the pumpkins look like now. This is a program that I've been working on the last 2 years with a grower up in around the Delta, Ohio area. It's a 60-inch row with twin row corn. The twin rows is actually, this is the first time that we did twin rows this way. Last year he did a single row and tried to plant 60,000 plants in that single row. So that 60,000 in a twin row is a lot easier for the corn to emerge, and it gives the root plenty of space to get started. But what we end up doing here in that 60-inch row is interseeding. And that's what it looked like a couple weeks ago. And then the right picture on the top right, that's what it looks like today. The cover is beautiful. As of right now, he doesn't have a lot of canopy closure. So he's not feeling what the effects of this is. But as that corn gets taller and another couple feet taller, what happens when you walk into that field with that 60-inch row, it's amazing how much cooler that area is compared to what the normal temperature is on a given day. The air movement that's through those rows, it's amazing. But so this is a 8-way mix in a twin row, and again, this corn has great energy. There's a lot of nutrients there to help feed the crop. I know maybe for some people, you're looking at interseeding, it looks scary, but this is working. Last year when we did this field, we actually ran 8 different varieties of corn, and just to see what corn handles conditions like this. And we found 2 varieties that really stood out. But again, I think that's how we learn. We find out what works, and once in a while we find things that don't work the way we want them to, but we keep experimenting to see what is the best practice. So that is my last slide. If you have any questions.
That's great. Thank you, Russ. If there's any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or come off mute. Russ, I do have a question actually, just to, I guess, maybe get some topic of discussion going. But I guess a topic that comes up quite regularly would be surrounding pest pressure with some of these growers that are planting cover crops, specifically in slugs. You mentioned in your the clover example that in that example, termination late was actually beneficial to in reducing that slug pressure. Is that something that you've seen in your experience, or I guess what are some different ways that some of these guys maybe wanting to implement cover crops can
well, normally whenever I saw slug pressure, I usually had guys use bait to try and get rid of the slugs if the pressure was high. But in this situation, when I had visited with a gentleman down in Putnam County, and he had the same problems. And I know, well, the environment of a slug is it likes moist soil and green tissue to feed off of. So if the environment is dry or is wet and the green tissue is there, it's going to feed, and it's going to keep feeding as long as it wants to. Now, I will also say every field that I walked this spring, in all those fields that had a cover, every field had slugs in it to some extent. It wasn't as bad as this field. So corn can survive or work through a low slug pressure. It's just when you have pressure like this that it does not handle it very well. And what we learned, again, this is something I just learned this spring based on what we are seeing right now, that portion of the field that's to the south of the woods, by not terminating the clover early, it gave the slugs a habitat to feed off of that instead of the corn. And then once the corn gets growing, the pressure of a slug, it's not detrimental to the crop.
Great, thank you. Very interesting.
Yep.
Any other questions for Russ? We have a few minutes here and want to respect everyone's time, so feel free to hop off. But if there is more questions, we can definitely hang on here. I guess if there's going to be no others that filter, and I do have one other question, I guess surrounding weed suppression. So you showed some pretty heavy residue and some different mulch.
Yep.
From your experience, what have you seen as far as weed suppression? Have you seen anything in regards to, I guess, a weed that's becoming more common in our area is water hemp? Have you seen cover crops help with different types of weed suppression?
Yes. There's no doubt. And actually, back when I was working in the ag retail business, there were many fields where before the farming operation had a cover crop being used, mare's tail, giant rag, water hemp, any weed that likes to grow where there's no competition for that plant to grow in, it's going to be overcome by weeds. Well, by having a cover crop, and I guess the only thing I don't know yet is what rate of cover crop do you need to make sure that you have enough out there to help choke off the weeds. But I do know whenever I saw a cover crop being used, the weeds pressure was suppressed. And so, yeah, cover crops do reduce weed pressure. There's no doubt about it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Russ?
And if you ever want to talk, you're more than welcome to contact me. I know all these fields that I showed you today, these are fields in process right now. We're going to see how they perform by the end of the year, and hopefully we'll have more information to share.
That's great. Thank you, Russ. As far as a contact for you, would you prefer email or any phone?
Yeah, email. Yep.
Okay. I can drop that in the chat if you'd like, or if you have an email you'd prefer someone to reach out to, you can go ahead and say it and I can put it in the chat.
Yeah. My email is russrice0@gmail.com.
Okay. There you go. I'll just put it in the chat for anyone listening in. If you want to contact Russ about his presentation today, feel free. But we are at 12:30, so unless there's any other questions, we can go ahead and end the presentation.